Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. The death of George Floyd federal trial.
Roll him on the side.
Ex-officer and defendant Thomas Lane takes the stand. And a surge of counterfeit opioids.
We want to bring awareness to our community on just the seriousness of this crisis.
Plus, the so-called Daytona Beach serial killer.
Mr. Hayes acknowledged in his interview, "I don't have a twin." He's the only person on this planet with that genetic fingerprint.
Here are closing arguments from both sides. But first,
it was a harsh reality as a child to see your father not be able to do that.
The defendant's family takes the stand in the movie theater murder trial. Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. The defense in a Florida shooting death trial calls its first witnesses, including family members of the defendant. Both the son and daughter of retired police captain Curtis Reeves testified Friday as their father faces murder charges for shooting and killing a man in a movie theater 8 years ago. Reeves is charged with second-degree murder in the death of Chad Olson. Reeves said he shot Olson in self-defense after getting frustrated when Olson was on his cell phone during movie previews. Defense attorneys say Olson threw his cell phone at Reeves and came toward him to attack. That's when they say Reeves shot Olson in self-defense. Several witnesses have testified they never saw a cell phone being thrown, but some have said Olson hit Reeves with popcorn from the bag sitting on his own lap. On Friday, his son, Matthew, who is now a Tampa police officer, told the jury about when he arrived at the scene as he was running late to meet his parents for the movie. Reeves' daughter also testified, telling jurors about her childhood and the changes her parents have gone through as they've aged.
One of the things you talked about is kayaking. That's something you did with your father?
Yes, sir.
And your mother?
Yes.
Was there a time that you can tell us about where it kind of hit you that your father couldn't do the things he used to be able to do when it came to kayaking, maybe sometime before 2014?
Yes, sir. It was actually, I moved into their house. I left my husband in April of 2013 and moved into their home. We actually went kayaking that very same month. So we went on the kayaking trip, and the kayak paddles are two-part paddles where you have to press in a little button and pull them apart. And it was a harsh reality as a child to see your father not be able to do that. He asked me for help to pull them apart.
Before Reeves' wife took the stand Monday, the defense called an aging and mental health expert to testify about reactions when aging and older people's being vulnerable.
The older people who are at risk for more medical and physical issues become vulnerable, meaning they're at risk to not be able to do things and not be able to protect themselves. In fact, the things that the older population are most afraid of are frailty, losing their health, being hurt, and having an untimely death.
Joining us today is LA County Deputy Public Defender, Philip Dubé and Terry Austin. Philip, how strong of a witness was this aging specialist for the defense? And also looking at the other side, did the prosecution score any points on cross?
Well, I'm not sure that I would call this, geriatrician, if you will, a strong witness for Mr. Reeves, because she is portraying him as a Grandpa Walton. And the truth be told, she wasn't at the scene at the time of this shooting. He was pretty limber, buoyant, and spry. He was quicker on the draw than the victim was, got that gun out and fired away. You would never know that he was suffering from any type of immobility, incapacity, or infirmity. So I think her testimony might be undercut really by Mr. Reeves' own conduct at the time.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of square that peg with what you see in the videos. You said, Terry, does the defense's witness seem to be attacking the prosecution's argument that this wasn't self-defense, or is it something else?
Well, I think the defense is solely claiming that it was self-defense. I mean, that is their only claim, and I wonder whether or not the jury is going to buy that. They're saying that he feared death or serious bodily injury. I mean, we heard from the wife that he leaned because he was in fear. We heard from his daughter there that she said he was frail and it really upset her. And, Dr. Cohen is basically saying that once you get to a certain age, you're extremely vulnerable. And so the defense is basically trying to say, this is why he reacted this way. This is why he shot the gun. But I agree with Phil altogether. You know, he moved quickly. So he couldn't have been too vulnerable because he was able to shoot him in the chest point blank.
Yeah, I'm curious as to whether or not this is setting the stage for Reeves to testify himself, or if this is a substitute for him to testify. Only way to find out is to continue to watch the Law and Crime Network for gavel-to-gavel coverage. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, the opioid epidemic sweeping the nation. What you need to know to stay safe. But first, here are closing arguments from both sides as the accused Daytona Beach serial killer stands trial for murder.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.
Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. An accused serial killer's case is now in the hands of a Florida jury as they are set to begin deliberations after closing arguments were presented Monday in the murder trial of Robert Hayes. Hayes is being tried for the murders of 3 Daytona Beach women more than 15 years ago. Authorities say Laquita Gunther, Julie Green, and Iwana Payton were sex workers who were found dead, shot in the head in late 2005 and early 2006. The cases went cold after an investigation led to no suspects. Then, 10 years later, another woman was murdered in West Palm Beach. After that, killing Hayes was put under surveillance. Officials say his DNA matched what was collected at the crime scenes. Prosecutors presented their closing arguments Monday, focusing on the evidence they say points directly to Hayes.
The evidence in this case is clear. It's supported by science. It's supported by fact. And the evidence shows beyond a reasonable doubt that in December of 2005, it was Mr. Hayes standing in that alleyway behind Laquita Gunther, pulling the trigger of a Smith & Wesson .40 caliber VE moments after he'd ejaculated into her mouth. It shows that it was Mr. Hayes who pressed the muzzle of the same .40 caliber Smith & Wesson VE into the back of Julie Green's head, leaving a burn mark from the firearm out in the middle of a field in a construction zone in the dark. And it shows beyond a reasonable doubt that it was Mr. Hayes who finally sent a bullet through the front of Miss Patton's nasal cavity, passing through her head in a dark field, again in Daytona Beach, within 4 weeks.
Hayes' defense team spoke to the jury one last time, making their case, saying there were holes in the prosecution's case and didn't prove Hayes was the one responsible for the women's death.
In fact, on all 3 of these cases, you have to make some kind of an assumption, and there is no fact to show that Mr. Hayes had a handgun in his hand at the time of the shooting of Miss Gunther, or at the time of the shooting of Miss Green, or at the time of the shooting of Miss Patton. In fact, there's no evidence at all that he was even in town when these incidents happened. Going back to Gunther, it's a Christmas holiday. The state didn't establish that he was even in the location, just that he lived in Daytona Beach.
Back to break down the alleged Daytona serial killer trial is LA County Deputy Public Defender Philip Dubé and Terry Austin. Terry, did the prosecution's closing leave you with any questions? And how long do you think the jury will deliberate?
Brian, I have no questions and I have no doubt, and I don't think it's going to take the jury long to deliberate at all. The prosecution was excellent. He went through the case. He talked about the elements of this particular crime. One, he said, the victim is dead. All of them were dead. No question. They were shot in the head, and that's uncontested. He said basically that the second element was that it was caused by the defendant. And he laid out for that jury the similarity in the bullets, and they were all dumped by his home, and the DNA. And then the third thing he said that you're going to have to find once you get the jury instructions is that it was premeditated. And I think he made a good case by talking about how it was planned. And so the jury, I believe, should come back with a conviction fairly quickly.
All right, so Philip, Terry thinks pretty quick conviction, but the question for you is, did the defense's closing sound more like mitigation for sentencing, or are they really trying to win this case?
No, it's definitely more like mitigation, Brian. Essentially, what he's arguing or downplaying is the power of circumstantial evidence. So what that someone didn't come into court and say, yeah, I saw the gun in his hand, or, that somebody physically saw him and these victims together. The power of circumstantial evidence is going to nail him, frankly. I think what this defense attorney is trying to do is condition this jury into sparing him of the death penalty in light of his age. You got to remember, he was 20 or 21 at the time. He was a college kid. And many years have gone by, and he may have, in that interim, led an otherwise blameless life. So we'll see.
We'll see how it plays out. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, we're entering week 5 in federal court as 3 ex-officers stand trial for the death of George Floyd. Plus, one pill can kill. Authorities now seeing an uptick in counterfeit opioids. What you need to know, still ahead. Welcome back. Counterfeit drugs have been around for years, but federal officials are seeing more fake pills containing opioids that could kill. Law and Crime's Angela Levy spoke with a DEA agent about the concerning trend.
Brian, the opioid epidemic knows no boundaries. Communities across the United States are dealing with overdose deaths, and the DEA is working to stop those drugs from hitting the street. The agency is also announcing a new campaign to educate the public.
Step away from the door!
Cleveland, Ohio. DEA agents break down the door of an apartment during a raid. Inside, they find counterfeit pills containing the often fatal opioid fentanyl.
Over the years, we've seen a significant rise, but it's really in 2020 we just saw it explode. And it's been extremely concerning for the DEA.
Jason Schumacher is the assistant special agent in charge of the Cincinnati office of the DEA. He says fentanyl has driven drug overdose deaths in the U.S.
Last year, we lost over 100,000 Americans due to drug overdose. These drug trafficking organizations operated out of Mexico, they mimic an identical hydrocodone, Percocet, Adderall, these type of drugs that are commonly seen on the street. And what's concerning for us is 42% of these pills contain a lethal dose of fentanyl.
At first glance, these pills look real, but some are marked with emojis, enticing teens. Schumacher says they get into the U.S. through commercial trafficking and what looks like a legitimate business operation. Others can come through the mail. Just last week, a mother and son in Wilmington, North Carolina, were charged with trafficking more than 50,000 counterfeit pills. Peyton Mitchell is being held on an $11.6 million bond.
Counterfeit prescription pills laced with fentanyl are deadly.
To fight the rise of counterfeit pills, the DEA has launched the One Pill Can Kill campaign, aiming to educate the public about the danger and efforts to root out drug dealers and their operations.
First of all, it's greed. It's all about making money. It's a business. It's an organization that they're trying to push the poison out to our communities. So they really don't care that 100,000 people died last year.
And Agent Schumacher told me that the DEA actually seized 10 million of those counterfeit pills last year. Brian?
Thanks, Anjanette. LA County Public Defender Philip Dubé and co-host Terry Austin are back as we discuss the case of counterfeit opioids. Terry, what do you think police and even lawmakers can do to fight the push these fake prescription pills out of our communities?
Well, look, I think the fake pills are a problem. I mean, seriously, if it's killing people, but I think the real problem is even deeper than that. It is the opioid addiction that is the real problem here. And I do know that the Health and Human Services has prioritized this. I mean, it's an epidemic. The fact that 100,000 deaths occurred last year, they're trying to get 5 different things started. They want better research, better data, better pain medication, better treatment, and better prevention. And if they do all of that, hopefully they can address the opioid addiction, and that will help as far as the fake pills are concerned as well.
Yeah, Philip, one of those plans of attacks is education and the ability to identify the fakes from the real pills. That seems to be like a smart plan. But is there more we can do or law enforcement can do to protect ourselves and our nation?
Oh, yes. But, short of a ban or an embargo on the active ingredients and, detox and rehab and, all of that kind of stuff and dealing with the effects and the permanent mind-altering effects, not to mention all the health problems that arise out of the drug, what pharmaceutical companies and the medical community should be working on is an antidote to counteract these toxic effects of the drugs. Because right now it doesn't seem like they can give the patients anything when they're overdosing on the fentanyl. So perhaps if they come out with something to counteract that, at a minimum and in the short term, it can save lives.
Absolutely. Now, Angela, is the DEA finding fentanyl in other drugs?
Yeah, they sure are, Brian, and it's being found in things like cocaine. That's a stimulant, right? But fentanyl is being laced on that cocaine or put into that cocaine, and a lot of these agents think that that's so the drug dealers can make their product more addictive. It's also been found in marijuana as well, so a number of drugs are being laced with this street fentanyl.
All right. Again, check out the DEA's website, learn, get educated, and take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Thank you, everyone, for your update on this story. When we come back, a third ex-officer stands trial and takes the stand in the death of George Floyd. Our legal analysts break down the charges and testimony of ex-officer Thomas Lane, still ahead on Law and Crime Daily. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. Closing arguments are presented as the three men convicted in the death of Ahmaud Arbery stand trial for charges of federal hate crimes. Father and son Gregory and Charles McMichael, along with neighbor William Roddy Bryan, all face federal hate crime charges in Arbery's death. On Monday, prosecutors told jurors that the defendants targeted Arbery because of his race, saying they refused to help him as he was dying because they considered Arbery to be, quote, subhuman. Defense attorneys argued the McMichaels acted in self-defense and were attempting to perform a since repealed and replaced citizen's arrest. Last year, all three men were convicted in Arbery's murder in a Georgia state trial. All three were sentenced to life in prison. Bryan is eligible for parole after 30 years served. The McMichaels will serve 20 years on top of their life sentence. Prosecutors say Arbery, a 25-year-old black man, was jogging near his Brunswick, Georgia home when the McMichaels began tailing him in their pickup truck. Travis McMichael eventually shot and killed Arbery. Bryan captured the incident on his cell phone. Also in federal court, the third and final ex-officer charged in the death of George Floyd takes a stand in his own defense. Tu Tao, Thomas Lane, and J. Alexander King all face charges for depriving Floyd of his rights in May 2020. Last week, Tao and King testified. On Monday, court resumed with the testimony from Thomas Lane, a rookie officer called to the scene. Lane is the only defendant who is not charged with failure to intervene, presumably because he asked Derek Chauvin multiple times to change Floyd's position. Last year, Chauvin was convicted in Floyd's murder in state court and has pled guilty to violating Floyd's civil rights in federal court. On Monday, Lane told jurors he was a rookie officer who deferred to Chauvin's veteran experience. Lane testified he also asked Chauvin to move Floyd onto his side, expressing concern for excited delirium. Body camera footage shows how that moment played out.
We're going on the side. Okay. I just worry about the delirium or whatever. Okay, that's false. We're going on the side.
Lane's charges are different than the other defendants, so how does his testimony need to differ, and was it enough for a not guilty?
Oh, that's a good question, Brian. Let me just tell you, as long as he can point to the fact that that police department did not have a firmly established intervention protocol with actual measures that a fellow officer has to take when they see another colleague or officer using illegal, unwise, or excessive tactics, If they don't have that in place, at least he asked questions of the other officer, even a superior one, as to whether or not they should ease up or do something different. He wasn't completely passive in the process. Now, on the other hand, he could have maybe done a little bit more other than just passively asked. They should have an established code word that lets fellow officers at the scene know, for example, that bad tactics are being used. If that doesn't work, then I guess the question is, are they trained to just step up and just push that officer off their victim? We'll see.
Yeah, if it's not in the books now, I'm sure it's going to be in the books for the police department going forward. Terry, do you think any of the officers would have been better off pointing the finger at each other? And why do you think they didn't?
I think it makes far more sense for them not to point their finger at each other, because that could really backfire if you think about it. I think the tactic that they took is the better tactic. They basically said, look, we did what we were trained to do, as Philip was mentioning. And if anything, they didn't train us well enough because we did everything we were told. And basically, I think each of them also has their own independent argument. Of course, Tao basically said that wasn't his job. He was watching the crowd. And Lane is arguing that he did try to intervene. He did try to say roll over. And I think King probably has the more difficult argument, but he too was in a position where he was following orders. So I think it's better for all of them to have the same story, stick to the story, assert their individual defenses, and then basically try to win that way.
All right, we'll see how it goes as this is kind of wrapping up in this case. Thank you both. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.